Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So Nicole from See Nicole Read and myself had a long chat. It was about tropes. We talked about our favorite tropes. We talked about our least favorite tropes. And it was a really great chat and it was very long. So even though we originally had intended for the whole video to be on my channel, after I was editing and realizing how long things were, I was like, maybe we should split this up. So I'm going to shut up now, and what follows will be the part of our talk where we talk about what our favorite tropes are. And then at the end of this discussion, if you're interested in some of our least favorite tropes and some of the juicy, like, ooh, problems we have with some of those tropes, then go over to See Nicole Read's channel to have that portion of our discussion. So again, that's See Nicole Read. I'll put a link down in the description. And I have favorite tropes, and she has our discussion on least favorite tropes. Thanks. Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. I'm here today with Nicole from See Nicole Read, and we are doing a casual bookish topics discussion, which hopefully, assuming she does well, I'll invite her back to do more. No, it's just going to be
no
super
pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. It's going to be super casual. Today's topic for our first one out of the gate is tropes. What are some of our just sort of general fiction tropes that we both like and don't like? So we both have made a list of sort of a top 3 to 5 of favorites and least favorite tropes to see in literature. So, wonder how many of ours will be the same.
Or conflicting.
Mm-hmm. So do you want to go first? What is
sure.
not your very favorite, but like your lowest on your list of favorites?
My lowest on my list of favorites, I would have to say, so we're talking overall literature, right? Not just like not just romance, right?
Sure, yeah.
I would say that one of my favorites, but not my most favorite, would be like the dystopian or the post-apocalyptic world.
Okay. Like a Hunger Games level, or
Yeah,
you mean
like
even
Hunger
more?
Games. I'm trying to think. I'm reading Maze Runner right now.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed the Walking Dead graphic novels.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of like shit's gone down. Now what? Life.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
All the way to have you ever read The Road by Cormac McCarthy?
I have not.
Or seen the movie with Viggo Mortensen?
Yes. No, I did see the movie because I like Viggo. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
super depressing now that
it's actually like a pretty good adaptation, I think. I listened to the audiobook and the whole book. I was just like, this is miserable. And I watched the movie because Viggo, and I thought it was a pretty good adaptation. But I mean, in that movie, like it's like,
I'm going to put that on my list to read.
It's like cannibal levels of post-apocalyptic, nuclear winter levels of dystopian. I mean, is that the amount that you're talking?
Maybe not so much like, I don't really like care about the cannibal stuff, but like nuclear winter's fine. Total despair is fine. I just don't want to read about people eating other people.
Okay. I feel ambivalent about that. I mean, I really enjoyed the Hunger Games series, but I don't really, that is neither a favorite nor a least favorite. Right. I'd say one of my, something I do like, but it's not my top favorite, is the trope of when not necessarily when they say it was all a dream, but I like the like ambiguous endings of a book where I do enjoy a romance where it's like, and they're married happily ever after, but I also enjoy a fiction book where, you know, sort of like the end of Inception, where like they just show that top and you're like, and then it just like cuts and you're like, so was it or wasn't it? Like, I enjoy that in a book.
See, I didn't have that in my bad tropes, but I don't like that. I have anxiety, so I'm like, but what next? But what really happened? I need to know. Like, it'll keep me up at night.
Oh, I think I really just more enjoy the twistiness of it, just to read the whole book and think that you understand what's happening, and then sort of at the very end you start to like something is revealed and you like retrospectively look back on the book and you're like, oh, but was that what was happening? I don't really have a great example. I mean, I guess Inception's sort of an example because as a movie, because at the end of that you're like, so was it real or wasn't it real? There was a short story I had to read in school where like it was a very short story. It was like 12 pages. The main character is a criminal and he is being hanged for his crime. And in the short story, they're like, and we sentence you, and they like knock the barrel over or whatever. And he drops and the rope, he struggles for a second and then the rope snaps, and they're doing it over the side of a bridge. So he drops to the river and he manages to like wrench the rope off and like swim down the river, and like he can hear the dogs. They're chasing him. He's a criminal. He like gets out and he hides in the bushes. He manages to make it home.
Like 1920? Oh.
Yeah, it's like it's before that too. I think it's like Civil War era. And he like manages to make it home. He like looks in the window. His family's there. They're like, you know, grieving because they think that he's dead, and he like walks in and they're like, oh my gosh, thank gosh you're alive. And then the whole story ends with like being like, and then he died. And so what happened was the entire part of him like escaping and making it home and was actually like his life flashing before his eyes, like as he was dying, as he was like hanging by the rope. And so I remember reading that.
You knew the ending. You knew he was really dead.
Well, that's true. But like, to me, that follows this trope because they retroactively change everything that just happened in that book or in the short story. And so like, I don't want to be.
No, death sounds pretty definite to me.
I mean, that's
like,
true.
There's no like, oh, what really happened? No, he died.
I mean, I guess that's a distinction between two tropes. I don't necessarily want a open-ended story where it just is like up to your interpretation, but I like when something is found out at the end that makes you look back on the whole rest of everything differently, I guess.
Yeah, but then I expect there to be a book 2. Like where you're supposed to like, mull over that, and then in book 2 you have your answers.
I guess I've always been a big rereader. Not of like a mystery story where you know who done it necessarily, but like if you like sort of like, we'll take Harry Potter for example, like once you find out that Snape I mean he's a douche canoe, but at the same time like he was working for good, and then when you reread the series you take that from this lens now that you know like what his ultimate goal was. And so like that's sort of what I'm trying to say poorly, is that like when at the end of the book they say, but did that really happen the way we said it happened? Or like then they wake up, and so like the whole book was a dream. And so it's like I don't want to feel cheated out of the story, but I like when there's information that makes you reevaluate how you've been thinking things.
I do like that too, but I want closure at the end of the book. Like I want to be like, oh my gosh, I was so wrong about him, or I missed that. But I want there to be some final closure at the end.
Okay. Well, okay.
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 So what is another favorite trope that you enjoy to read?
I like fairy tale retellings.
Okay.
And I know you just finished one.
Yes.
And how do you feel about those?
I am somewhat ambivalent, partly because if there's too much that's similar in the retelling, then I'm like, well, you got A, B, and C. Why didn't you get D, E, and F? But then if it's not that much similar, I'm like, well, this was a really loose interpretation of retelling. So It's like, you can't satisfy me either way. So you recently read
Oh, not so recently, but I sort of read it like at the right age that it's really stuck with me over all these years.
Okay.
Briar Rose by Jane Yolen. I looked it up. It is by Jane Yolen,
Okay.
which always throws me for a loop because she writes children's books too, I think. Um, but that is like the retelling of Sleeping Beauty from the time of the Holocaust and concentration camps. And like I said, I read it right at the right age that's really stuck with me as like one of my favorite books. I really enjoyed it. So as I've come to adulthood, I like fairy tale retellings, and I added the one that you just read to my list to read next. So
The Beast of Bezek.
yes,
Yeah. Um,
I do appreciate that sort of like modernized, different look on a classic.
I feel like, so for like that book that I just finished, The Beast of Bezek, um, to me, the like Beauty and the Beast has inherent magic in it. So I want the beast part to be magically done or magically undone.
So you
So
want him to be like perfect in the end, like Prince Adam?
I I just felt like okay, like in that book that I'm talking about, Beast of Bezek, like he is scarred from the war, and he has both physical scars across his whole body and face and head, but he also is like emotionally scarred. So it works on a lot of levels because he is altered, he's changed, and people look down on him because he's supposed to be this duke, and dukes are traditionally handsome, and he is disfigured.
And those things aren't going to go away. Emotional
Exactly.
and physical scars don't disappear overnight.
Right. So I don't discount the fact that he had these scars from both a traumatic incident, but also like a traumatic, like emotional baggage that he has to work through. I don't deny that. And I think it's interesting because he has to work through that to make the romantic relationship work. I just felt like I wanted like a magic portion, I guess. I don't know. I just like years ago I read a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and it's called Beast, and it's by Donna Jo Napoli, and it's a young adult book. And in that book, the main character, Prince guy, he's like a prince, but it's in like Middle East. There's like camels and festivals, and like I think he's Muslim maybe. And so he is um turned magically into like a beast that's sort of lion like, or very lion like, when he has to sacrifice an animal like to a god or multiple gods in a festival, and he sacrifices an animal that was not like pure, like that was the ritual that he was expected to perform, and he knew that animal was not satisfactory, and he did it anyway. And so then he's punished for that by turning into like a beast. So there was this magical element, but it also was like
Like
this different.
cursed.
Right, he was like cursed, and so he like travels across the country, and he holes up in like this castle, and ultimately like finds the, like, that's basically when the Beauty and the Beast part starts. But
Right.
like I found it super interesting because there was still the magic element involved, and there was this whole other cultural aspect that gave gave a better reason for him to being changed, not just like, you wouldn't put me up in your castle, you're cursed. I don't know. Retellings can be done well, and I can enjoy them.
But if they had the original magical element, they need that moving forward.
Right. If he's magically, if the beastly character is magically transformed into an animal or disfigured or whatever, then at the end that magic needs to be resolved. So I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed Beast of Bezek, and I have read retellings that I've enjoyed, but I want more Disney style retellings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I also enjoy, one of my other tropes that I really enjoy is the like anti-hero or the like morally gray character, where I already kind of mentioned Snape, and I feel like he fits this because he does bad things, but he also like does good things. I also feel like Loki.
He does bad things for good.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like Loki from the Marvel universe kind of fits this. I feel like Deadpool sort of fits this. I like those characters who are
I
sort
don't know.
of
I think Loki's pretty self-serving, but maybe that's another discussion.
that's yeah. I mean, I think it could be argued either way, but like, there are moments where he allows his brotherly relationship to Thor and his like duty to the people of their country who as guardians. Those things pull on him too, and he does actions
You're right.
to
You're right.
so it's
We
like
see that in the end, but for the first several times we see him, I don't think we see that.
okay.
Sorry.
No,
Anyway,
it's fine. I was just saying that like I like a character who's a little more complicated, and who kind of starts out as a bad guy, and then over the course of the book or series, you see that it's not black and white. They're morally gray.
So while you kind of like a character that's like morally gray, I really favor a character, specifically like a man that's like really rugged and burly and like a man's man. That's what I like. That's what I look for in a character. Someone who's like not afraid to get dirty and knows like how to start a fire from nothing, and they're like muscular and beefy and
All
perfect.
around handy.
Yes, all around handy, can fix anything. Like, oh, your generator's not working and we're in Alaska and there's no night or there's no day. No problem, I got you. That's what I want in a character. Someone, I don't want to say somebody who can like fix anything, but someone who has like a good skill set and can handle like whatever's thrown at them. That's the kind of character I like.
And I feel like the parallel to that in like a fantasy series is sort of the like uber fighter character who's just sort of like the like, I'm here for the protection, and they're just like coming out swinging.
My favorite character is Captain America. So
oh, really? Interesting.
Opposing your Loki. Yes, not that you said Loki was your favorite, but I'm a Captain American girl. I also enjoy Hawkeye.
I like Hawkeye too. I don't know who my favorite is. I generally don't pick favorites. I mean, I really enjoy watching Loki, and I enjoy watching Sebastian Stan.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever see Gossip Girl? He was in Gossip Girl.
No, I never watched Gossip Girl.
Oh, XOXO.
Okay. I don't know. He's not my favorite Chris. Let's put it that way.
Oh, he's my favorite Chris.
I think
like the other Chris's don't even enter the realm.
Oh, wow. I like, oh my God, I'm blanking on his last name. The Chris who was in Jurassic Parks. What's his last name? Chris Pratt. I was like, it's not Chris Pine. It's the other one.
Well, when you said you don't know it, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to know it either. But I pulled that one out. So Pratt.
Yeah, I like Chris Pratt a lot.
Because he's like also like the funny, good looking one.
Yeah. I mean, I like Chris Evans. I think I like Chris Evans better than I like Captain America.
Oh, I mean, I see that, but like, I really like Captain America. I like Cap.
Yeah. Anywho,
like rugged and does what's right and fixes the problem. And
I like a good rugged man, like in my romance. I need that. Yeah. I can't reach that light bulb, and they like stretch, and then like their shirt rides up, and you see the like abs, and you're just like, sorry, yeah.
How about my other light bulb?
That's right. Yeah. So I don't disagree there with that. I would say I'll pick my top favorite trope.
Okay.
Which is possibly controversial. I really, when it's done well, which I don't have any examples for. When it's done well, I really
not that often.
I really enjoy a good love triangle.
Okay.
And very classic examples of love triangles include like Harry Potter, Ron, Harry, Hermione, and also like Twilight, and also to some extent like Hunger Games. And I actually disagree that any of those are really love triangle. I mean, Twilight's a love triangle.
Twilight, yeah, but not so much Harry Potter.
And but I mean, there was a lot of people who really shipped Harry and Hermione, who wanted
those people.
You're crossing into dangerous grounds, okay? There are a lot of Harmony shippers out there, okay?
You know.
We like you. We respect you.
Ron's my boy.
Yes, I do know this. But I don't know. To me, I really enjoy the angst that a good love triangle can bring. I frequently feel that what I meant by those aren't love triangles is I frequently feel like I know where the author is taking the relationship. I know who's going to end up with whom.
Mm-hmm.
There is a whole variety of romances that just like are like, oh, there's three of us. Well, guess we're a triad now. And I've read very little of that.
I'm not interested in that. I like definite couples. No, I mean like I like the love triangle, but not like when they're like, oh, I guess we're a triad now. I don't dig that. I want like a definite defined couple.
How many triads have you read?
None, because because that's not my bag, baby.
Okay. I know
No,
there is
Austin Powers. No, okay.
I never saw Austin Powers. Least favorite cousin. Demoted.
You're done.
No,
I have to check with any of the others if they've seen it.
I'm sure the boys have.
The boys, yeah, they're well, you're my age. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
My parents said I was like not allowed to watch it. Like it was too raunchy or something for me.
What have you been doing with the last 10 years of your life?
I don't know. I always thought it sounded stupid.
It would probably be stupid now. It's like you had to see it then. Like if I saw it now, I'd probably still be like, ha, 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 ha. But like if I was seeing it now for the first time, I'd probably be like, what's happening?
Yeah. So I don't like I always felt like it was really clear that like for example of Twilight, that Bella and Edward were going to end up together. Like even throughout New Moon, when she's convinced that Edward is not coming back, and she kind of like debates with herself for 1 second, that like maybe she should try to make something work with Jacob.
Did that stop me from being Team Jacob? No.
Oh, you're always officially Team Jacob?
Always officially, yes.
Oh, we should have it. Oh, that's a whole nother video. Okay.
That's a whole nother, yeah.
That's next month. Tune in.
Team Jacob versus Team Edward, apparently.
I mean, so here's the thing is like, I always felt like it was really clear that Bella was Bella wanted Edward. She might, if Edward had not, if the events of New Moon had not happened, if Edward had not thought she was dead, or if Edward had been willing to stay away from her or whatever, I think that Bella would have ended up with Jacob, but he was not her like soulmate. Like she loved Edward way deeper and more intensely and more like truly than she ever did Jacob. And so, yes, she might've been willing to make a relationship with Jacob work, but at the same time, she was always Team Edward. So I was always like Team Edward in that I knew that Bella was going to end up with Edward. I was definitely Team Taylor Lautner over Team Robert Pattinson.
Oh yeah.
Like,
see, I felt like if Edward had disappeared and never came back, like she could have been like full-fledged Team Jacob.
I don't think that she ever would. Like she kind of talks about it in New Moon, which I just reread.
You remember better than I do, yeah.
It was basically right before all the shit goes down. She's kind of debating whether or not she wants to be in a relationship with Jacob. And there's a moment where she's like, it's right when Alice has come back. Like Jacob is driving Bella to her house and they don't know, it's after the cliff diving, and they don't know that Alice is in that house. And Bella is debating whether or not she could like, she's like, Jake is such a good guy and he wants us to be together. Could I give him my like shattered, broken, crappy heart? Like I would have to commit to him 100% and like work really hard to make the relationship work. But like, maybe I could give him that. And like, because she felt like he deserved it. But like, I never got the impression that she was like in love with Jacob. And I don't know that she ever would have, I think she would have like continued to be fond of him and kind of, she thought of him as a brother and she could have loved him the best she knew how, but like her whole heart and soul was like tied with Edward's.
See, I feel like broken, shattered hearts heal. And then sort of like whoever helped that heal sort of leaves the friend zone is what I think. Like,
yeah.
So like if Alice hadn't come back, if Edward and everybody and all the rest of the events of the whole series hadn't happened, I feel like she might have put herself back together. Of course, she was kind of weird. Like
This
I feel
became
like
a Twilight show.
she could have been, which sort of leads me, like I'm going to redirect the conversation here.
Do it.
Sort of leads me to like fake relationship, marriage of convenience, like that kind of trope, which is like sort of looks at how people who weren't really dating, didn't really know each other that well, suddenly become like an official like married couple or an item, and how that not knowing each other evolves into a friendship, evolves into liking each other.
Yeah.
And ending up together. And I can see how like if Edward hadn't come back, she and Jacob could have entered that territory. Yeah. Like relationship of convenience or necessity or need, like whatever, could have became like a full-fledged relationship.
I think that they could have made it work. I think they could have been married and happy. I just mean that like I think that Bella considered Edward to be her perfect other half, and Jacob was her almost perfect other half. And I just think that like, I mean, this is from Bella's perspective as an 18-year-old depressed teenager. So like, you know, maybe she could have fallen for Jacob. I think that she could have been happy with Jacob, but I think that Edward was supposed to be like her fated destiny soulmate. And so like, I don't know that she ever would
like then bring in Renesmee was Jacob's fated soulmate. Yeah.
Right.
So they needed to end up together. Yeah. I understand. Yeah.
I'm just saying that like people claim like in the Hunger Games that like Katniss and Peeta and Gale are in a love triangle. And that one is much more interesting to me because Katniss doesn't really love either of the guys. Like both of the guys claim to have feelings for Katniss, but she doesn't seem to really have feelings for either of them. She'd always sort of assumed that like maybe something would happen with Gale. But then like she has all of the bonding with Peeta, and even at the end of the first book she's like, I'm a little unclear on how much of that was true. So I felt like the love triangle was not a realistic love triangle because she couldn't be with Gale, but I enjoyed that tension. Yes. And in what ways she would be different pairing with A or B, you know. So like what I'm saying is like I frequently feel like I can tell who the person's supposed to end up with, so it doesn't really feel like a love triangle to me, but I enjoy all of the angst that the characters have to go through for them to figure that out.
Yes. And like with Peeta and Katniss, there's that shared trauma in the post-apocalyptic or dystopian world that really plays an important part that wouldn't play a part in a typical love triangle book.
Yeah. They never would have been together if they hadn't been in the games. Like he had like unrequited love for Katniss before they were in the games. But like, you know, he was just the baker's boy, you know, she wouldn't have gone for him otherwise.
See, I just read a book. It was called That Boy. That was supposed to be like this love triangle where you didn't know who she was going to pick. And I just didn't like, in the end, I don't know if it wasn't done well or if it was like my mood that day. I didn't care who she ended up with. I couldn't predict who she was going to end up with until like the third to last chapter. Then you were like, oh.
Yeah.
But I just didn't care.
Yeah.
So it has to be, a love triangle has to be done well. There has to be angst. There has to be like the weighing of like all of this stuff.
Yeah.
There has to be the weighing of who's best for me, who do I want, who wants me, for it to be done well.
Right. And and like you said, that's a great example of this trope existing in a bad book, you know, and being done poorly, and that can kind of tank that book. Yeah. I read a romance
you have to care.
Right. And I read a romance earlier this year where the main female character like has started seeing this guy. It was an adult romance, an adult like Western romance, and the woman had started seeing this guy, and they were being intimate, and you know, but it was just like casual dating. They never committed to anything, and so then she starts seeing, like, she sees this other guy And so she's sort of dating two guys at once. She does not know that these two guys are actually friends until they like all run into each other like at a bar. And so then that's when the guys both realize that she's been like seeing both of them. But like no one's upset because they never like were in a committed relationship or like had set any like this is serious rules. So the guys
in real life are people like, no, we weren't like serious. Or people like, I'm gonna fight you.
You and I are both married to our high school sweethearts.
I know. We don't have much like to go on.
That's right. Yeah. I think that
I feel like in the real world, people would fight.
I think in the real world there's an understanding that until you have that conversation that you're being secular monogamous, that like it's understood in this day and age that that's not necessarily happening. And I'm like,
ooey.
Yeah.
I hope you never have to date again. That's all I have to say.
So in that book, the two guys, once they find out, they kind of basically are like, well, you have to pick. And she's like, I can't pick. I like you both for different reasons. Like, if you're going to make me pick between the two of you, I'm out. Like, I don't want to see either of you. And so both of them feel like she'd been like more girlfriend material than like, you know, like, wham bam, thank you ma'am material. Yeah. And so both of them come to her and say, let's I want you to date both of us. Like monogamously, but with the both of them. Like it was like, so she would travel with them while they did their rodeo circuit, and she would sleep with both of them. So they were in the
same rodeo? Oh.
Yeah, and there was like a couple like threesomes, but like the guys were never doing anything. It was just like both guys were interested in this girl, and so she was having sex both singularly and all together with the two guys. And I was like, I was not expecting this. I was not expecting this either. I was like, oh, this is like a cowboy romance. Whatever, I'll read this. I didn't know anything about it before I started, so I was like,
I already told you like trios were not my thing, so I'm like, oh god.
Well, so like, well, I mean, it's never going to be a triad, because the whole time it was
like
weird
triad. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and it was sort of understood that like she would need to pick one of them, but it was like, who is she going to pick? And so I really didn't know who she was going to pick for a solid like 60% of the book.
But in the end, she did choose one, right?
Yes, in the end, okay. She was like, guy A is the one that I am more emotionally connected to, and we have a deeper connection. And like guy B had started to realize that, and so he starts pulling away to sort of allow her to realize that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got on this topic. Oh, it was kind of a love triangle because both of the guys wanted her to pick them. But like,
okay.
It wasn't, and that was one where I felt like I wasn't sure which guy she was going to go for. So I enjoyed that love triangle because she could see her life was going to diverge with whichever guy she picked, and it was going to like go, she really thought about what her life would look like if she went with A or if she went with B. And so I was like, and there was a lot of angst and like tension happening, so I was just like, yes, this is good.
There.
I just said that the fake dating / marriage of convenience / arranged marriage is my top favorite romance specific trope.
I think that's like my second favorite. I don't know how many I've listed so far, but I think my favorite is someone is like one of the characters, usually the girl, is starting a B&B or a cafe or a hotel or a restaurant. What else did I write here? Some kind of business. Mm-hmm. And she's like working really hard. That's like her passion. And the like other, like the male lead, like swoops in and is like, let me help you. I will just live your dreams and your fantasy and I'll help you. And he's usually a rugged man who knows how to fix things.
So it's sort of like Luke swooping in on Lorelai being like, let me help you run your inn or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think that's actually how it ends, but.
Not exactly. And he still has his coffee shop. I mean, like he supports her opening her inn, but he doesn't really have too much of a hand in it, does he? He comes to her house and fixes things.
He supports her dreams.
Yes.
Do you have a recommendation for that trope? Like a book?
I just read one that I'm like hesitant to say because I don't think it's like my favorite, because it also contains one of my least favorite tropes. But it was Marriage for One. And she is opening a coffee shop, and they have a marriage of convenience. It's many tropes in one.
Yeah.
They have a marriage of convenience, and he like swoops in and helps her open this coffee shop. And I did enjoy it, but I don't think it was like my favorite trope for someone is starting a business, B&B coffee shop. That's what I wrote. So, I mean, it was good. I read it. It was like a one-day read. It was pretty good.
Yeah. So what are some of the tropes that it had that are your least favorites? Or let's transition to our least favorite tropes. So that was our discussion on some of our favorite tropes in literature. Again, if you want to hear our discussion on our least favorite tropes, that is posted on Nicole's channel over at See Nicole Read. So I'll put links down in the description box. If you guys have any comments about what your favorite tropes are, or if you totally disagree and we're totally wrong, great, tell us why we're wrong. And if you have any suggestions of books that fit our favorite tropes, leave them down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and do all the interaction things, and don't forget to check out the least favorite tropes over on Nicole's channel. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.
I had some really good brisket tacos. Oh my God, I could eat them every day.
Okay.
I like food. I belong in the fam.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Not about you. I meant like, yeah. Oh, amen.
Oh, food. Yeah. Preach.
So